In the previous video, we discussed how to configure a Kanban board. Let us now take a look at Jira software reports. In this video, we are going to take a look at Scrum reports. We will take a look at burn down and velocity chart, and we'll also take a look at Kanban reports, mainly cumulative flow diagram. So right now I'm logged into my Jira instance, and if I go back to my Scrum based project, which I created earlier, and the project name is Android Development. If I click on it, I can see here that on the left hand side, if I go to the report section, when I expand my sidebar, I can access all the reports that we have in the Scrum based project. And today I want to spend time mostly on the burn down chart and velocity chart. So let us first take a look at the burn down chart, which is one of the most important report when it comes to the agile Scrum based tracking. So right now in this particular burn down chart, if you notice, you have this gray baseline, which is actually based on the amount of work that you plan, and it is currently depicting me the story points which you planned in the specific sprint. So for example, in this particular sample sprint 1, if you scroll down further, you have the information about the initial planning of your sprint. So this report is telling me that on 20th February, you had planned a lot of issues that you wanted to complete in the sprint, and the total story points that you have is 18. And as you proceed further in the timeline, you can see here that the red line will actually indicate the actual progress of your work. So this gray baseline is based on the amount of work that you initially planned, which is in this case 18 story points. And ideally, when you are working on your issues every day, and if you're resolving them on a timely manner, you can see that this particular gray line will decrease and it will indicate the amount of work or number of story points you're burning. So you can see here that the red line will actually indicate the progress, and ideally this red line should follow the gray baseline. So this particular graph for my sample sprint 1 is actually quite good, because I can see here that my red line, my actual work, is almost on track. And finally, when the sprint is finished, this red line should ideally meet the gray baseline. And if you take a look at the details of the work which is happening in this particular sprint, you can see here that on 21st of February, you completed some issues. Right now we have this information here, and it says that you burned 3 story points. And if you continue further till the very end, you can see that in the very end of the sprint, you were able to complete a lot of stories. And that is how the sprint burn down chart is quite good here. But if I show you one more sprint burn down chart, if I go to my sample sprint 2, and this particular burn down chart is showing me that right now we are in the middle of the sprint, or maybe we have finished the sprint, and the red line is jumping up again and it is surpassing my gray baseline. And it means that somewhere in between, more items were added in the sprint, which ideally you should not do. So you can see here that the red line is actually jumping up. And if you scroll down and take a look at the details, you can see that on 13th of March, there was a scope change. And if you add something in the sprint which is already running, then you will have a very clear indication on the burn down chart. And by looking at this burn down chart, I can get a feeling that I might not be able to deliver everything on time. So this is one of the most important report when it comes to the Scrum tracking. The other report which I want to talk about is the velocity chart. If you take a look at this velocity chart, you have a very clear indication of the number of story points you committed in a particular sprint and the actual story points that you finished. So if you notice on this particular sprint, sample sprint 1, you committed 12 story points and you finished only 16. If you take a look at your sample sprint 2, you committed 11 but you finished only 6, which is also depicted on the velocity chart here in the form of the bar. And you have this clear indication that after 2 sprints, if you take an average, your average is somewhere around 11 story points. So when you plan your next sprint, let us say sprint number 3 or sprint number 4, you will get this idea that based on your past performance, your capacity is 11 story points. So ideally, after a couple of sprints, maybe sprint 0 or sprint 1 or sprint 2, you will get to know your actual capacity based on your team members or based on the competency of people that you have in the team. So these two reports, burn down and velocity, are one of the most useful reports in Scrum based project. Let us now take a look at the Kanban project, which is my iOS development project. And in my Kanban based project, I don't really have the burn down chart because we are not really working on the sprints. But I do have one very useful report which is called as cumulative flow diagram. And if I click on this particular report, I will be able to take a look at the overall status of my Kanban board. And this report will give you the indication that in the past few weeks or maybe since the start of the project, is there any bottleneck that you have in the project? Let us say if you see a lot of orange color on this particular date on 4th of March, or if you see a lot of purple color, and you can see here that these colors are indicating the statuses that you have in the workflow. So ideally, when you have a lot of orange color or a lot of purple color, which is continuously flowing in the timeline, it means that you're not working on the issues and you're not really resolving them on time. So ideally, when you have a lot of colors in the cumulative flow diagram, they should ideally decrease. So this will give you a very good indication. And in the current report, I can see that since my March 6th or 7th, and in the past few weeks, I have a lot of green color, and it means that I am able to, or maybe my team is able to deliver and finish the work on time. Cumulative flow diagram is one of the most important report in Kanban, and apart from these Jira software reports, you also have the ability to create your own dashboard, and that is what we will discuss in the later sections. So in this section, we discussed how to use Jira for development projects. We discussed overview of agile concepts. We learned how to configure a Scrum and Kanban board. And finally, we spent time on discussing Jira software reports. In the next section, we will discuss setting up help desk using Jira Service Desk.